Dear HSC learners, welcome to online English class. We have been reading the short story named The Luncheon, and today it is my fourth lecture on this short story. I have been discussing what happened between the writer and his lady guest at Fouts. We see, although the lady guest assured the writer saying that she never ate more than one thing for luncheon, but surprisingly we see she made the writer order about half a dozen of food items, and each of the food items were costly on the menu. So in my last session we came up to the food item named asparagus, that the writer ordered asparagus for the lady guest. Let me go to the text. Here the writer says, "We waited for the asparagus to be cooked. Panic seized me. It was not now not a question of how much money I should have left for the over for the rest of the month, but whether I had enough to pay the bill." So we see, when the writer ordered asparagus for the lady guest, the writer was panicked. The writer was afraid of the bill. The writer says, panic seized the writer. So we see the writer saying, now there is no question of how the writer could pass the rest of the days of the month. It is now the question that if the writer had enough money to pay the bill. So here we see the utter helplessness of the writer while entertaining the lady guest at Fouts. And in the course of the events we see, at one point there is a great humor for the reader. It creates a great effect on the reader minds when reading the short story. When we see, the writer says that if the bill came to more, it would be mortifying for the writer. It would be a matter of shame for the writer to borrow from the lady guest. So the writer thought that he would pretend that his pocket had been picked up. So we see the writer saying, if the bill came to more, I would put my hand into my pocket and with a dramatic cry start up, saying, my pocket had been picked. Of course, it would be awkward for my guest if she had neither to pay the bill. So the writer here says, if the bill came to more, that the money he had, he would start up crying, saying his pocket had been picked up. So these lines make effects on the reader's mind. On the reader's mind. Let's now go next. The writer now we see the writer says he was past caring now. So I ordered coffee for myself and ice cream and coffee for her. So as the writer now had no question of how much money would come as the bill, he was past caring. So he ordered coffee and ice cream for his lady guest and a coffee for himself. Now the writer says, the lady guest says, you know, there is one thing I thoroughly believe in. One should always get up from a meal feeling one could eat a little more. You see, this is an example of irony when the lady guest says one should give up a meal feeling one could eat a little more. This is an example of irony because there is difference between appearance and reality. The lady guest here we see is trying to teach the writer why he ate a heavy thing like mutton chop. So the lady guest says she doesn't believe in overloading a stomach by eating heavy things like chops. The writer now again asking his lady guest, if the lady guest was still hungry. Let us go to the next and see what happened. Oh no, I am not hungry, you see. I don't eat luncheon. I have a cup of coffee in the morning and then dinner, but I never eat more than one thing for luncheon. I was just speaking for you. Oh, I see. Here we see when the writer is asking the lady guest if she was still hungry, the lady guest says to the writer that she never eats more than one thing for luncheon, and today is an exceptional day. It's a enjoyable environment, and as they were chatting at Fouts, and it was a good environment. So what foods, some items of foods that the lady guest ate that day was just for conversation. That he was in a conversation, that she was in a conversation with the writer. This is why she ate a lot of food items that day. But usually she never eats. Then a terrible thing happened. While we were waiting for the coffee, the head waiter with an ingratiating smile on his false face came up to us bearing a large basket full of huge peaches. They had the blush tone of an innocent girl, they had the rich tone of Italian landscape. But surely peaches were not in season, then Lord knew what they cost. You see, you have filled your stomach with a lot of meat. My one miserable little chop, and you can't eat anymore, but I have just had a snack, and I shall enjoy a piece. This is another thing what happened between the lady guest and the writer you see at Fouts. While their conversation was going on and the writer was ordering one after another food item for the lady guest, at this point we see the writer, the waiter came up with a basket full of huge peaches. You know, peach is a kind of fruit which is very much costly, which is very much costly, and which is very, very nice to eat. So the lady guest expressed her desire to have a taste of peace, and again we see the lady guest telling the writer that she never believes in overloading a stomach, and she surely believes that the writer's mutton chop had already filled the stomach of the writer, so he was unable to eat anything more. What happens next we see. The bill came, and when I paid it, I found that I had only enough for a quite inadequate tip. Her eyes rested for an instant on the 3 francs I left for the waiter. I knew what she thought me mean. But when I walked out of the restaurant, I had the whole month before me and not a penny in my pocket. The bill came and the writer paid the bill, and the writer, after paying the bill, the writer walked out of the restaurant and found that he had the whole month before him and not a penny in his pocket. So, this is a miserable situation for the writer. When you see the writer was put into a helpless situation at Fouts, and after paying the bill, he had not money enough to pass the rest of the days of the month. So, this is a miserable situation on the part of the writer at Fouts. Let us go next. Follow my example, she said, as we shook hand, and never eat more than one thing for luncheon. I'll do better than that, I retorted. I'll eat nothing for dinner tonight. You see, the lady guest and the writer walked out of the restaurant, and when the lady guest, when the writer, when the question of, when the writer at the time of departure, when the writer walked out of the restaurant, the lady guest told the writer that the writer should follow the example of the lady guest, and the writer should never eat more than one thing for luncheon. At this time, the lady guest, you see, was found to be very happy and in a joyful mood, and before departure, she was teaching again the writer that that the writer had not done the right job eating heavy things like chops. Let's go next. But I have had my revenge at last. I do not believe that I am a vindictive man, but when the immortal gods take a hand in the matter, it is pardonable to observe the result with complacency. Today she weighs 21 stone. And the writer says that the writer is not a revengeful man. The writer never likes to take revenge, but the writer, after a long time, but the lady, after a long time, the lady became 21 stone. So, 1 stone equals to 14 pounds. So, in that case, the lady gained a heavy weight. So, it was a natural punishment that God imposed upon the lady guest. So, in short, this is this is what I discussed about the short story, The Luncheon. So, we see, although the lady guest assures the writer, saying again and again that she never eats more than one thing for luncheon, she made the writer order about half a dozen of food items at Fouts. You see, the lady guest ate caviar, she ate salmon, she had champagne, she ate asparagus, she had ice cream, coffee, and even she ate a kind of fruit named peas. So, this is an overall understanding of the short story, The Luncheon. Let's now see some vocabulary about this short story that we find in this short story. Luncheon means a midday meal, a formal lunch. Play, a theatre performance. Senator, a lawmaker, a member of the parliament. A startle, to get a sudden shock, to have a sudden shock, to be surprised, bill of fare, a menu where you can see different kinds of food items with their cost. Caviar, the mass of eggs of a large fish called sturgeon. Hospitable, friendly. Hospitable means friendly. Vindictive means revengeful. Stone equals to 14 pounds. Effusive, showing too much emotion. Ingratiating, intended to get someone's support, intended to get approval of someone. So, my dear learners, in my next session, next class, I will show you how to write summary after reading a text or a short story, or how to write flowchart or some other questions related to this passage. Related to this short story, the luncheon. Thank you all for being with me, for watching this video. Thank you again. I will see you in my next class. Thank you all.